Everybody to the November 19th, 2020 regular meeting of the Marysville Board of Education. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Luke?
Here.
Ms. Savage?
Here.
Ms. Powers?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Ms. Devine?
Here. Thank you. And now if you all stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First on our agenda, I would accept the motion to adopt this agenda.
So moved.
Is that you?
Second.
And a second by Ms. Savage. Roll call.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Savage?
Yes.
Mr. Luke?
Yes.
Ms. Powers?
Yes.
Ms. Devine?
Yes, motion carries. Next, I'd like to welcome our Union County Health Commissioner, Jason Orsina, again. Really appreciate him taking the time in what I know is an extremely busy time for him, but he's agreed to come and kind of give us an update on things in our county.
Hello, everyone, and it's nice to speak with you again. Please, this is really fairly informal from my perspective. So if you have questions, don't wait till the end to ask those questions. I think I'm speaking with Superintendent Allen. She was just asking if I would be available to give sort of a general perspective of what's happening within the Marysville district as well as the county. If you've been following along either on the news, the newspaper, or our stream on Facebook, you've probably seen some of our posts that speak to a fairly significant surge within the community over the last few weeks. The surge really began about a month ago, and it escalated very quickly. When we look at just even the last 3 weeks worth of data, we saw almost a doubling in our case counts each week moving forward, the rate of cases that's officially published by the Ohio Department of Health. Now, there are some distinctions between the data we typically publish locally and the State Department of Health. But one of the things we've had to explain to folks over the last 2 weeks in particular, we are not able to update that data easily right at the moment because we're doing so much in the way of disease investigations just because of the high number of case counts. The last 2 weeks, we have about 40 new cases per day that we're investigating, and that is putting us significantly behind on other activities within the office. The paper has an article today that I would stand behind everything that's said in that article. Kayleen did a nice job of reporting on it. Even if it seems somewhat inflammatory by the headline, the truth is that we are prioritizing disease investigation right now because we have so much, and that is the most critical aspect of what we're doing for the response at the moment. With 40 new cases per day, it's putting quite a bit of strain on the available resources to do things like the manual data entry we have to do in order to issue local reports with local data. So at the state level data, you can see we have over 800 cases per 100,000 as sort of our rate benchmarked over the last high mark over the last 2 weeks. We've been in the 700 range several days in a row, and a high point of just over 800. We've seen an increase in hospitalizations, an increase in new cases, outpatient visits, and unfortunately we saw 2 outbreaks in our nursing home facilities within the county, and we saw several additional deaths as a result of COVID. Now, we switched to 4 deaths from COVID. All 4 of those that were previously reported are community deaths. We saw 2 additional deaths have been reported. We will likely see 2 more reported within the next 24 hours, 48 hours. Those are congregate set, at least 3 of those would be congregate setting related. So we are starting to see the breakthrough events, the tipping point that we sort of were guarding against all summer long. We have reached that point, and we have widespread community transmission, even more than what we saw a couple of weeks ago when I spoke with you in person. So the ground situation has changed dramatically from where we were a few weeks ago. Now, I assume you want to know, so I'm going to jump right into it. What does this mean for your school age population? There's a couple of things that I would point to even today. I cannot tell you definitively that we have rampant school transmission of COVID-19. Particularly within Marysville School District with your hybrid plan that you're using, I don't find transmission being linked to the school day. I just don't. And to some degree, that's been true even in the other school districts. We know mask wearing is a significant mitigator. We know that social distancing also works that way. And so there's not really strong evidence that points to transmission during the school day. When we have had cases transmitted during the school day that we've been able to pinpoint, they're usually explainable pretty quickly. Students that have had an interaction or staff that have had an interaction that sort of violates the mask or violates the social distancing protections. And then we do see transmission that way. And that's true in businesses as well. We've had pretty good experience with businesses, and when we've had breakthrough events in businesses, they're often linked to something regarding the protective measures or the lack of protective measures. What I can also tell you, however, is that we know our student cases are going up commensurate with our adult cases. And so the student cases are going up. They still represent, in any given moment, 10 to 20% of the cases within the community. It matches really the statewide experience. There is no question anymore that children, school-age children, contract and spread COVID-19. It is pretty definitive at this point. Now, their experience with COVID, still very mild. Union County's experience, we do not have any children that I'm aware of at this point that have been hospitalized as a result of COVID illness. We do not have any children that have died, thankfully, from COVID illness. Matter of fact, the cases are so mild, they are probably often overlooked by parents and caregivers because children have a short-term illness. Recover is a very common example of how it manifests in kids. So a runny nose, maybe a mild fever sometimes, not even all the times, upset stomach, 24, 48 hours, and then they're back bouncing around the house. So we are seeing it overlooked. When we're identifying cases of COVID in young children in particular, it's usually because someone else in the house has become ill. And then we see the family take steps to either test asymptomatic kids because they're in the house, or they're testing a child that has shown some mild symptoms that would have otherwise been ignored if not for the fact there is a known COVID case within the household. So we're picking up cases of COVID from those situations, from exposures that then lead to folks to monitor very carefully for symptoms. And as we do this, it's become very clear, particularly in this 11 to 17, 18, 19 age group, that adolescent years, they do get the disease at really a rate that mimics the total population rate. And research has shown that they spread the disease like an adult spreads the disease. So there's still some question about the role of young children, and we don't see as many cases in young children, but that may be because of the asymptomatic piece. It may also be because they're overlooked because of the mild symptoms. It could be because they just don't manifest the disease at all. Don't know. I hate to say that over and over again. I don't know the answer to that. That's one science is still looking into. When it comes to the adolescent population, there's very clearly transmission going on. I don't see it necessarily in the school day. I do see it after the school day. We've had a number of sports teams that have been impacted by this. We have a number of extracurricular activities that have been impacted by this. Some that the school monitors, some that the school doesn't, obviously. And we see it in a lot of social settings. So folks ask me, well, is it sports teams? I can't tell you that it's sports teams. I have some transmission that has occurred with sports teams that seems linked to a sports training or otherwise. But so often sports teams also are engaged in activities after the sports training is over, after practice is over. They're still engaged because they're friends, their teammates, their colleagues. It's hard to untangle that puzzle and know whether or not the transmission occurred during practice or if it occurred afterwards while they were hanging out in those moments after practice is over. I don't have a solid answer for you on that. What I can tell you is I don't see clear transmission during the school day. Could be happening, but I don't see evidence of it. That's one of the things the OSU study may help pinpoint. And right now, that is the only study going on that would even speak to that I'm aware of in the state. I do see transmission among this population, and it is clearly linked in many cases to events outside the school day. And science has really proven that adolescents in particular carry and spread COVID just like an adult. So when we're talking through where are you at with the school day, I don't have strong feelings that your hybrid model is a success or a failure. I don't see evidence that it's causing a problem. That may change with the Ohio State study, but right now I'm still fairly confident in what's going on, as long as you're seeing good mask usage, good adherence to the risk mitigation procedures you've put in place that we've talked about, and you're continuing to encourage those others. I don't have a strong feeling that that's not being successful. I do see transmission after the school day among this population, and they carry risk to everyone they come into contact. So that's sort of what we're seeing across the community right now. Social gatherings are number one, the transmission point, and they will likely continue since we're going into the holiday season. So I'm happy to answer questions that you may have at this point.
Dr. Orsina, do you have a sense whether adolescents are transmitting it to each other when they're being transported to school or home from school, or to and from extracurriculars?
I have some cases where that has come out as a likely cause, but it's not, I can't say universally that that's the impact. There have been some situations where folks have transported carpool for an event or otherwise that has led to transmission. I don't know how widespread that particular cause is. When I look at the breakdown of cases that we're looking at, the majority of adolescent cases are contacts with another case, not community acquired. So in other words, we're tracking them back through other cases that have come up. A lot of those are peers or household contacts. We see a lot of household spread among this age group.
Are there any hospitalizations of students under 18 years of age?
Statewide, yes. Within Union County, I would have to look again. I wasn't aware of any the last data we did. I just got an updated data set today, and I haven't dug into it.
How many cases, Jason, do we have in hospitalizations right now?
Actively in the hospital, I believe it's what we reported yesterday, which doesn't include new data from today, was 41 active hospitalizations. To give you some context, the entire period of time from March, really our first actual case that gets traced back is in late February, I think is the time frame, or January. Anyways, if we go back to the beginning of the pandemic, the total cumulative case count for hospitalizations was 31 cases. In the last 22 days, we added 41 more hospitalizations.
Wow. Okay.
And do you know what percent capacity that is?
I do not. In terms of for the hospital capacity, I can speak to ICU capacity as a region. The ICU capacity in the region is right now more than 80. I look at the data every day, so forgive me if I get this off by a day or so, but we've been hovering right around 85% capacity for ICU. The threshold amount where we start to get concerned about capacity is 80% was the threshold that was set by the state. So we're at 85% over that threshold where we want to start monitoring, and we have some concerns. And among those cases that are in ICU, in the last few weeks, we went from a low of 5% being COVID related to 15% being COVID related.
Okay. Thank you.
If I can, I want to go back a little bit, just clarify for myself. The cases of transmission in school are for the most part situations where there's been a violation of the face mask or the 6-foot distance. But other than that, having the face mask, maintaining the social distance seems to be working. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, so I would clarify just a little bit. You've got the gist of it. When we have clear transmission during the school day, whether it involves staff or students, and not just Marysville, but I'm just talking in general, there's often something we can point back to. The staff or student had lunch together, okay, and which may have been allowed, that they're sitting at the same table and they obviously have to take a mask off to eat. But that obviously carries risk, and that led to a transmission event, or seems to have led to a transmission event. There are, of the 158 or so cases, youth cases that I looked at, 54 of them are listed as community acquired, meaning we could not determine where they contracted the virus. So I can't say whether they contracted the virus in the school day, from someone else randomly at practice or what have you. I mean, and that's out of 158 cases, 54. So it's a third of the cases we can't track where they got the virus from. Half of the cases I can track and say they got it from someone who had the disease. So that's why I always put the caveat, I can't tell you it's transmitting during the school day, except these instances where it's really very clear.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Any other questions for Dr. Orsina? Okay.
So there has been, can you still hear me?
Yes.
There's been discussion, I think you said when you were starting your report that you don't really have a strong position for or against the hybrid model that we're using at this point. A lot of people are talking about all the travel that may happen over Thanksgiving, a lot of the family gatherings, and you've mentioned that a lot of the transmission is happening in social gatherings. I don't know if you can even forecast this, but do you think that there may be a benefit to staying with the hybrid model if that happens over Thanksgiving, or going virtual?
Sure. Here's my forecast holiday-wise. Even the best intentioned folks will have a hard time if they gather with family and they mix households. Even the best intentioned folks will have a hard time preventing transmission if someone's COVID positive. They will, unless they really take strong steps to limit the number of folks at that event, and to know what the history of those folks are, and to think through eating outside and sort of setting it up so they're not sharing too many dishes. You can have some small gatherings and do it relatively safely, not safely, relatively safely, mitigate the risks. But we know a lot of folks will have difficulty doing everything they need to really protect themselves and their loved ones in those situations. Every time we've had a holiday for the last 9 months, we see a spike. We see a spike begins within a week, 2 weeks, we see the spike, it climbs, and that becomes our new plateau for just where we're going to be at. And the latest surge we're going through comes on the heel of Halloween, of all things, and some other things. But we can sort of go back and point and see the spike beginning at the end of October, 1st of November, just like we have with every other holiday. There's every expectation we will see some increase and a new plateau. Our hope with all these communications is that we don't accelerate the current surge, that we at least hold to the surge pattern we're on now, which is hard enough to manage for everyone in the community. But if we can hold to that pattern, that will be better than seeing an acceleration in cases, which would inevitably occur if everyone didn't pay any attention to what they need to do to protect each other during the holidays. So that's our goal right now, is at least hold on to where we're at now, not lose any further ground, and hopefully begin to level off and catch up those few weeks. It's going to be difficult. It's doable, but it requires a lot of folks to agree to do that. So then we look at, what does that mean for a school day? Well, if I don't see transmission in your school day because your folks are wearing a mask and they're taking these protective measures and they're being cautious during the day that they're at school, and the hybrid model is being effectively applied, so you have 6 feet of social distancing, we're going to continue to have a hard time finding case transmission within the school more than likely. Because with a mask and 6 feet of distance, transmission should be fairly well controlled. It's not perfect, but it should be fairly well controlled. There's a fair amount of risk mitigation going on there. And then you've done your other things with the hygiene in the building and the cleaning and all those other pieces. So I don't, at this time, with what we know, if all of those things are controlled, then there's unlikely to have a dramatic impact on school through the school day. You will have an impact on staff and students who will be eligible to come to school because they will be ill or exposures from the activities that went on during the holidays that lead to them being excluded from school. So I think your bigger risk is from that than it is from the school day itself. That's what I would suggest right now. Also, because
Okay, thank you. I understand that.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you're hybrid, it also means we're not going to be excluding as many kids from school if you have a case that's in the school. That's really will help significantly with your quarantine requirement and transmission within the school. That's the long-winded answer to a very easy question.
No, it was
Dr.
exactly
Orsina?
what I was trying to get my head around. Yeah, thank you.
Dr. Orsina, what about immunity? So once someone has had COVID and they've recovered,
Mhm.
do we know that that immunity sticks around for a while?
Right now, the immunity from naturally occurring COVID is thought to protect you against being a carrier to transmit the infection for 90 days. So 90 days after recovery, if you were exposed again, you would not be required to be in quarantine because you would not be considered a risk for reinfection and spread. Now, we have folks whose original infection can cause a relapse later on. That is different than getting a new infection, however. So you have a 90-day window where you're not subject to quarantine if you're re-exposed.
Relapse, that kind of leads me to believe that the infection or the virus stays with you.
There is a population of folks who become ill with COVID that have ongoing issues. There's various terms for it. The research is still being built around that idea. You've heard the term long haulers and that sort of piece, where that's some of it. We also find folks whose infection never quite clears completely. They recover enough to be removed from isolation. But then a few weeks after they have removed, they see a resurgence in their illness. It's not a large percentage, but there is a percentage of folks that occurs with.
So if you're retested after a certain amount of time and it comes negative, you know that you're not in that group?
I can't answer that. I have not heard that specific piece. Whether or not you will test positive following a COVID exposure, we have some folks who will test positive, clearly have the disease, and will test negative within 10 days. We have other folks who test positive, clearly have the disease, meaning they're symptomatic, and are still testing positive for weeks later, potentially. So it's not clear on that piece. And I haven't looked into that recently to even give you a solid answer.
Thank you.
Do you happen to know, this is a little bit off the wall, but I'll throw it out there anyway. Do you happen to know if there's any technologies on the horizon that might help us? I know the vaccine is the biggest one. Is there anything else out there coming around? Like I heard there might be like these really quick tests that you get at the drugstore, almost like a pregnancy test. Is there anything like
the home rapid test? Yeah, there is talk of that home rapid test that would be available. As far as I am aware, I think it hit popular news this past week, but as far as I'm aware, no one has an EUA approval to release that to the general public yet. Rapid testing in general, it's a good screening tool. It's a bit like a pregnancy test. Pregnancy test, the home pregnancy, is really a screening tool. And you still go to the doctor to get a confirmation that you're pregnant, for instance. So I think you will see development of those sorts of things coming online over the next couple of months. And they will have a place in the overall response. We would still use symptom, an epidemiological link, and a PCR as being the primary way to identify cases. But that's a great screening tool to sort of point someone and say, maybe I should call my doctor. Any other questions?
Nope.
Looks like that's about it. Thank you so much for spending this time with us again and answering lots of questions and bringing us up to date on what's happening. Good luck, and thank you to you and your staff. Appreciate what you're doing for our community. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome. If any board member has a question they would like me to follow up on, please forward it through Superintendent Allen, and I will do my best to get you an answer back, okay?
Will do.
All right, thanks everyone. Stay
Good
safe.
evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next on our agenda, we are going to be recognizing some more state qualifiers from our Japanese program. And I think Mr. Langhouse is going to be sharing this information with us.
All right, good evening, everybody. How are we all doing tonight?
Good, how are you?
Doing well, doing well. We wanted to take a moment to recognize our students who work with the Japanese language and who were state qualifiers last school year. Again, due to COVID, we did not have the opportunity to recognize them last spring. So again, we wanted to recognize them this fall. So we'd like to first start off and say congratulations to multiple students. First off, Aiden Johantes, he participated in the JASCO speech contest and earned a second place rating, which is excellent. Michael Hughes, same speech contest, third place. George Penne, he participated in the advanced category at the state level. Katie Burns participated in the high school category at the state level. And then, of course, congratulations to Adam Doomball, the same speech contest. He participated at the National Digital Japan Bowl as well. So again, congratulations to those students. Next, we have the Ohio Japan Bowl, and we have a first place team at the level 2 competition. Sarah Henderson, Keegan Mulligan, and Emily Polk. And next, we'd like to say congratulations to the second place team at the Ohio Japan Bowl, level 2 competition. Congratulations to Preston Herring and Dylan Harper. Oops, I apologize. I mentioned it earlier in the presentation, but we did have 3 students that participated in the National Digital Japan Bowl at the level 4, Adam Doombald, Michael Hughes, and Aiden Johantes. Congratulations to the 3 of them.
I think everybody needs to unmute so we can give them a round of applause.
Hey, congratulations.
Yes, and I know the JASCO competition was, they had live streamed it on YouTube, and I did have a chance to watch a little bit of it and listen to some of our students. I didn't understand anything they were saying, but it was incredibly impressive. I know that they've been attending that competition now for several years and really representing Marysville well there. So we're so proud of them and glad to be able to recognize them. Okay, I think next up, it's our public participation. I don't believe we have any, but want to confirm that.
We did not.
Okay. Next on our agenda then, we are to our reports. So Ms. Savage, do you have a High Point report for us?
Yes, good evening, everyone. The number one big issue is that High Point is moving to full remote this Friday through Thanksgiving. They have a large number of staff either ill or quarantined, and a large number of students either ill or quarantined. So they're going to go ahead and shut down completely and go remote until November 30th, when they'll move back to hybrid conditions. Today was the start of the pre-bid meetings for the expansion and renovation of Ohio High Point. So this whole process has been delayed approximately a year. They had to start over with a new contractor. So they went ahead and did rebids today. So all that information should be in, and the bid should be back December 8th. December 3rd is scheduled for virtual tours for Ohio High Point. So students within the Marysville School District that might be interested in attending Ohio High Point technical programs as a junior or senior can take a digital tour of the facility on December 3rd. And then on Tuesday, December 8th, there's a virtual open house where students can sign up through Zoom links to look at specifics on programs and talk one-on-one to students and advisors within those areas. So that's all I have for today.
Thank you. That's some good information. Next, we have our superintendent report. You're muted right now.
Yep.
There you go.
Marcus will go ahead and start a presentation as that's loading. I will go ahead and share with you that starting Monday, officially, the board office will start to the construction process. We will be relocating to different areas across the district, and you will still be able to contact the office through Amy in the regular phone number. So we still have the same capacity. The doors just, no one will be within the building. So we'll have to set up times if people need to drop off paperwork in different locations or to schedule appointments for enrollment. We'll still be functioning. We'll just be spread out a little bit over the school district. So we'll keep our doors closed, but still in action.
And how long do they think that's going to take?
Yeah, we expect that to take 4 to 6 weeks. So stay tuned. We have communication going out to parents explaining that information as well. So, construction as it is, we think 4 to 6 weeks, give or take time each direction. All right, so what we wanted to do tonight is follow up on several things that have been circulating throughout the district, and follow up on last meeting when we were together. Mark and I promised to bring back to you metrics which we could use as kind of a decision-making framework or to really inform our thinking. And tonight we'll go through that as well. Go ahead, Marcus. I'm going to share an update with you on our CATS project, which is an OSU project that will directly benefit our information and a data dashboard. We'll share our new data dashboard with the metrics that are embedded for a potential decision framework. I will also do a highlight of the testing that's taking place with OSU here on our campuses. I'll give you an update on Virtual Learning Academy and our remote learning days. Go ahead, Marcus. I first wanted to start by framing our situation up. I thought Dr. Orsino talked quite a bit about the changes that the county had experienced. This slide shows you on the left really was the last time that we were together as a governance team. And you can see the changes really for 1 month that have impacted our district. So you can see that our number of cases and quarantines have drastically increased. And this number is as effective at 4 o'clock today. This is also a snapshot from our dashboard that gives you a breakdown by building. So it kind of gives you a different view of where those cases and quarantines are at this point. We start with our partnership with Ohio State on the CATS program. This program is a data dashboard. It's being funded by Central Ohio ESC, so there's no cost to the district. And it's a collaboration through several entities, Ohio State, the Health Department, and Union County Health. And really what CATS will bring to the table is a focus on our data and our students. They'll be able to set up, right now we talked to you quite a bit about the townships. That's not truly the exact boundaries of the school district. The CATS program can provide that kind of technology. They've been working with other school districts, Upper Arlington, Hilliard, Westerville, really since probably September, early onset, helping them also work through risk factors, identifying metrics as well. So we're excited to bring their data on board to really complement what we've started as a school district, kind of as a grassroots effort. Things I want you to keep in mind. We've had obviously substantial community spread. You heard that from Dr. Orsina tonight, about 8 times of really what the CDC considers high spread. We know that there's a curfew and other potential restrictions. I think Dr. Orsina actually even gave you updated numbers. So mine are even outdated as of a conversation that we had this morning. So unfortunately, that death number for Union County has increased, as you heard. And again, that I thought he did a nice job of explaining and clearing up maybe some misunderstandings or maybe just misinformation, really around students not being able to spread the disease. And certainly right now the health department is experiencing very heavy demands. So I know that they are really struggling to stay ahead and keep up with the 40 cases a day. We are pretty anxious about the upcoming holiday season and potential for more spread of the disease. And again, like we talked last time, we fully get the idea of really kind of this idea of exhaustion over the pandemic, and several people maybe have, community members may have let their guard down, and just re-emphasizing the importance of those safety protocols that really matter in the spread of the disease. So together, we've really been working on a new dashboard, and we have really had a solid feedback loop with this dashboard. It's been shared and feedback has been given through the superintendent's task force, as well as our medical advisory team. We've met with Dr. Orsina on multiple occasions for feedback as well. We've ran it through a couple of administrative feedback sessions as well. So we're really pretty pleased with how this dashboard is coming together. We feel that it's a combination of a lot of best practices from what we've seen in other communities and school districts, as well as it uses a lot of different platforms and not just our platform for data and data information. And again, it provides kind of a multifaceted look at decision-making, as opposed to saying if we reach red, we're going to do this, or if we end up purple, we're going to do this. It has more of a tiered approach. And I'm going to turn it over to Mark and let him walk you through the elements of the dashboard.
And if we could, Marcus, yeah, actually we need to go, let me go back. Let me go back real quick so I can get that link opened. Yeah, let's try to see if I can get this to open up. It's weird. I'm controlling Marcus's screen through my screen right now, so it's a little different for me. So to talk about the dashboard, I'm going to do three different things. I'll talk about the core components and structure. I'll cover the key indicators, and then I'll also talk about the reference data at the very bottom, and then show a time lapse of how the model has performed over time since the beginning of the school year. So when you first see our dashboard here, you'll notice that there's three primary components. There's this colored scale. There are 6 key indicators, and then there are 3 referenced indicators down below that are not scored. And in order to get started with our dashboard, you can go immediately to the Start Here button. When you go to the Start Here button, this drop down will appear, and it will explain all the pertinent information relative to our scorecard here, how the actual scale works. So each one of these indicators is scored. The higher the value, the better. In the world of COVID, that might be a little confusing, but we're trying to accrue as many points as possible. And those points will drive our current score up and down this scale. You'll also notice that there are 3 colored zones, a red, a yellow, and a green. When we are sitting within the yellow zone, the recommended action is to be in a hybrid instruction model. If we're red, it's a potential remote learning model situation. And if we're within the green zone, that would be a potential return to in-person learning. It's important to note that just because we pass into a zone does not necessarily mean that we would immediately switch the instructional model. It's very pertinent and important that we remain within that zone, or it's recommended to remain within that zone for at least 14 days so that the overall model and the score is stabilized, which would be indicative of a stabilized situation on the ground in Marysville schools. And at the end of the day, all final decisions regarding a change in instructional model will be left to the discretion of the school board and or the superintendent of Marysville schools. So that's how our scale works. When we look at the individual indicators, like I had mentioned, we have 6, and I'll talk about each one of these key indicators and the rationale behind them. Our first indicator is the student case rate. This is a tracking of the actual student case rate within Marysville schools. If you hover over the scored indicator, it will provide you an 8-week time lapse of how that has moved over time. You'll notice on the little pop out there that it says October 4, October 18, and November 1. It actually carries through to the current week, but I can only fit so many dates within my little view here. So we actually have this data current as of this past weekend. The reason it is negative right now is because we find ourselves in a high spread student situation. So we're above that 1 per 1,000 or 100 per 100,000 guideline established by the CDC and supported by the Ohio Department of Health. So that takes us to a negative 0.5. This is a weighted indicator. So when the student spread rate is high, it can drastically impact student or school operations. Conversely, if we find ourselves in a low spread situation, if we're 0.5 per 1,000 or 50 per 100,000 in our student case rate, that would give us 3 points on the indicator. So when things are going well, they're going very, very well, and the student case rate would have a very low impact or no impact at all on the day-to-day operations of our school district. So that is a weighted indicator. And for each one of these, there is an information bubble, so you can see exactly the underlying data that dictates the actual score that lands on our scorecard here with the criteria for it. And it also notes that this is a weighted indicator. Parallel to the student case rate is the community case rate. And this is the data that comes from our township boundaries. Similar to the student case rate and the other indicators, when we find ourselves in a low spread situation, the indicator is worth 2 points. If we're moderate spread, it's worth 1 point. And if we're in a high spread situation at the community level, we'll receive 0 points on that indicator. We also felt it was very important to have information that captured the situation on the ground in Marysville schools relative to our ability to meet personnel needs when we have folks out of the district, whether that's for maternity leave or personal leave or quarantine or COVID-19 isolation. Basically, the entire gamut of reasons that personnel can be out of the district. We wanted a way to know how many people we have available to help cover those positions across substitutes and teachers' aides and principals and instructional coaches, and then how many people each day we have out of the district. This indicator is worth 2 points, like indicator 2. We would get 0 points if we have 3 or more buildings that are impacted. We receive 1 point if we have 1 or 2 buildings impacted, and 2 points if none of our buildings are impacted. What changes the colors on this particular indicator for each one of the schools is that if we reach a situation where we've used up or we've covered 80% of the people that we can cover, kind of that tipping point, that is when that indicator will turn yellow. When we are using all the available personnel we have to cover the outage or that tipping point for the building, that indicator will then go red. So essentially, if you reach that point and you have one more person that becomes sick, potentially, whether it's a classroom teacher, an intervention specialist, so on and so forth, we lose our ability to essentially cover that classroom, which would be a very grave situation. So that is the building's operation indicator. Parallel to that is a tracking of our infrastructure impacts as well. Now, this is a weighted indicator, just like indicator 1. We're currently sitting at a negative 0.5 for this week because we don't have transportation services. Transportation services are a critical part of our infrastructure. It drastically inhibits not just our school district, but it also impacts the community. So that's why we're sitting at that negative 0.5 right now. If we had, just one department that was moderately impacted, like if it was just maintenance right now, we would have 1 point. If all the departments, the infrastructure departments were online and there weren't any personnel impacts due to quarantine or isolation or being sick or out on maternity leave, so on and so forth, we would have 2 points for this particular model. So again, this runs parallel to that building operations impact, but it specifically tracks critical infrastructure within the district. We also felt that it was very important to capture what the week-to-week absence rate looks like for all reasons, whether that's vacation time usage, personal leave, bereavement, family medical leave, so on and so forth, across the district on a week-to-week basis for our certified staff, like our teachers, counselors, speech pathologists, principals, and our classified staff. So food service, transportation, so on and so forth. On a weekly basis, the average for Marysville schools over the last 15 months is an absence rate of 6.39% per week. So if we are at that 6.39%, we're averaging that absence rate for the week, we would get 2 points if we're at or below that. If we're between that and the top end of our scale, so that plus or minus of what's considered normal for Marysville schools, we would get 1 point. And if we go over 9.3%, we would receive 0 points, and we would be well outside the bounds of what a typical absence rate looks like for that week in Marysville schools. And again, that could drastically inhibit and impact building operations. Last but not least is indicator 6. This is a qualitative indicator that directly tracks our ability to implement the CDC's recommended mitigation strategies for inhibiting the spread of COVID-19. It includes, having regular cleaning and disinfecting schedules, being able to engage in contact tracing, practicing good hand and respiratory hygiene, having mask usage compliance, and being able to engage in social distancing. This particular indicator tracks our ability to do these things, and it can change dependent upon the instructional model that we find ourselves in. So for example, if we returned to full in-person learning without social distancing, social distancing would then turn red on this little pop out here, and we would drop 1 point on the model because we've lost the ability to engage in social distancing. If we find ourselves in a set of circumstances where we are unable to do 2 or more of these mitigation strategies, we would receive 0 points on this particular model. So for example, even if we lost our ability in a hybrid model to conduct contact tracing, we would lose a point on this particular indicator, so on and so forth. So it tracks our ability to implement these CDC mitigation strategies. And again, just to reemphasize, all of these points are added up in order to derive our current score for the district. And as you can see right now, we're still within a high recommended hybrid instruction model, but we are literally sitting at the cusp of a potential recommendation to consider a remote learning situation. At the very bottom of our scorecard or dashboard, there are 3 non-scored indicators that are just reference. The reason they are not scored is there is a strong cross-correlation between these particular indicators and other indicators already on our board, so to speak. So that if I included the public emergency level for Union County and scored that in tandem with our community case rate or our student case rate, I would essentially be double and triple scoring some of these indicators. And we wanted to distill this down to the most salient information. So just as a reference, again, it's not scored. We have the public emergency level for Union County, which is updated every week. The public emergency levels for the regional counties, so for Delaware, Franklin, Madison, and Marion counties. And then we also track and report the county case rate, which is available through the Ohio Department of Health's public health alert system. So we're able to gather and curate all of that data as well. The sources of our data come from the Union County Department of Health, the Ohio Department of Health, as well as Marysville Schools. And through the CATS project, we will also be able to incorporate data that they curate for us and send back to Marysville Schools as well. So I have multiple streams of data from multiple sources through this multi-organizational partnership that we have going on right now. I also wanted to highlight how the scorecard has performed over time. So I have tracked our score for the district throughout the course of the school year to see on a week-to-week basis what would our score have been. And we've averaged a score of 6 throughout the course of the school year, which would land us in a recommended hybrid instruction model. And even as recent as 1 month ago today, we were on our way upticking towards a potential recommendation for a return to in-person learning. But given the last 3 weeks in Union County, our model has very well mirrored the situation that's playing out on the ground within Marysville and Union County right now. And again, we're riding that cusp of a potential recommendation for a move to remote learning. So that is our overall scorecard. I'm going to turn control back over to Marcus. Are there any questions that I could answer regarding our new indicator dashboard?
I'm sure they're going to.
Yeah, Mark.
Go ahead, Dick.
Mark, on the dashboard that you were showing, up at the top on the scale, the indicator was sitting, it looked like it was sitting on 3.
Yes, that is correct.
But the numbers in the 0, total 4. Is that correct? Or is this just for example?
There are 2. So 2 of our indicators are negative. That would take, so there's a negative point, 2 negative 0.5s on the board, which is going to take away a point immediately. So yes, 3 of the indicators total 2-4 right now, but we also have 2 other weighted indicators that have gone negative that are inhibiting and dragging that score down at the moment.
Thank you very much. One of these days I'll learn to add negative numbers.
I just want to comment how I just am so grateful for this new dashboard. I really think it's logical. I like the fact that it's looking at a variety of pieces of information. I think the weighted ones make a lot of sense to me. And just the layout of the whole dashboard, you've kept it nice and clean, but all of that additional information is right there at somebody's fingertips. And it seems very intuitive to me. So I'm I'm guessing that this took quite a bit of work, and I really appreciate all of the time and effort that you put into it, and the fact that you've run it past a variety of people I know are board. You were nice enough to kind of meet with us individually to kind of give us a heads up and see if we had any questions before the meeting. And I can already see a few of those revisions that you made based on some comments. So thank you for all your work.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was a wonderful undertaking to be a part of.
I know you really
Is
like
this going to be, is this going to be live on the website in the near future, or is it still in development?
Actually, it could go live onto our website as early as tomorrow. I'm permitting clearance for that.
Yeah, our plan is to
Right.
have it go live, and then Mark and I do a video explaining it to parents, similar to the little snippet you just received that we could roll out to parents. We wanted to vet it through one more group today, so we don't have the video shot yet, but we'll be organizing that with Marcus.
I can't remember on that slide. Is it real clear how up to date that information is?
So there is always a last updated piece of information, or it's just a string of text at the bottom of that dashboard. So as it stands right now, I typically update it every few days. The only data that is slightly lagging at the moment is our student and township or community case rates. And that's just due to the queue of disease investigation that the Union County Health Department is currently working through. But typically every weekend I receive updates on that data from them. Everything else, including the staff weekly absence rates, that's updated every single week without failure. Our infrastructure and building impacts, those are updated every single day. So this data is literally as live as we can possibly make it, while also having these multi-organizational partnerships where we need to curate data from multiple sources.
Two observations. One is I really think this helps people to understand how complex the situation is in making decisions. I know that a lot of people a month or so ago were saying, this indicator or this piece of data suggests that maybe we should go to an in-person model. But the second point, I guess, is that we're about 12 weeks into the school year. And in terms of trying to deal with something that hasn't existed before, 12 weeks is not a lot of time. And I think it's important that we've been able to take some time. You've been able to gather a lot of information. We've been able to identify the things in our school district and in our community that are really the things that are going to be most impactful on us being able to deliver the best quality education that we can. And I think this dashboard kind of puts all that stuff together and allows people to see where we are. And I think it also challenges our community. Second point I want to make, I think it challenges our community as we go into the holiday seasons to say, these are the things that we need to work on. We need to be wearing masks, we need to socially distance, we need to be aware of how our particular actions in our home and our community can impact what takes place in the school district, because that's a key component of what's considered in this dashboard.
Any questions or comments from others?
No, just thank you, because I like being able to physically see it, and it really lays it out nice. So thank you for all the work.
Oh, like I said, it was a joy to be involved in this project. Okay.
All right, Marcus, I think we can move forward a little bit. That's okay.
Yeah, and I just want to, well, my only other comment is just kind of that reminder again that you're looking at this kind of over a 2-week time frame. So it's not something where if we would drop down to 2.8 tomorrow or something, it's not going to be an automatic recommendation to do anything.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we've said from the get-go, really, that we want to stay with a model as long as possible, and that would continue to be our intent. So we'd like to make sure there's stability in that number, and that's the 14-day guideline is really reflective of CDC guidelines and best practices as well. So at this point, we're going to stay the course with instructional model number 2 and being mindful of those upcoming holidays, continue to monitor spread and absences. Really, I think that you saw and have seen over the past couple of weeks the impact of that absences, particularly of staff, really kind of handcuff us into different situations, for example, with transportation and asking parents to have to bring kids to school. Our ability was at Creekview was very compromised with 13 absences at one point. So I do think that that will continue to be one of the most influential factors in our ability to stay in instructional model 2 is really the absence of our staff, quite frankly, either between quarantines or cases, and also just typical absences. I think that when you look at the dashboard and sometimes see, oh, well, there's only 3 people that are absent, that dashboard that you're looking at currently is only reflective of COVID impact absences and not just normal absences, such as people having babies or paternity leaves or a child of someone just gets sick. So there's much more depth to that as we're making decisions as well.
And I think, kind of going back to when we originally approved the different instructional levels, I believe we had talked about the fact that, we could run into a situation where all of a sudden there's not enough staff and a certain building needs to go remote. And I think that's, just kind of a reminder to everybody that can happen at any time.
Correct. Early on, we did, and I think those are still posted under the COVID tab, say that some of the models actually could be implemented by a building or a grade level, for example, as opposed to a full district approach.
Right.
The next project that we're very excited to partner with Ohio State on is a research project that is really aimed to look at the COVID mitigation strategies and see their impact within a school setting. So kind of coming back to the question Mr. Luke has had more than once about school spread, and anecdotally, like Jason referred to a little bit ago, anecdotally, we would tell you we're not seeing school spread, but from a science perspective, are we 100% sure? I think you heard Jason said, not really. I mean, it's our suspicion that that's the case, and without a testing strategy, that's difficult to prove. So we are excited to partner with the testing strategy that Ohio State has partnered with the State Department and the governor's office. We started this week. We start on Monday. Just a reminder to everyone that if the student is not comfortable or the parent is not comfortable, they're certainly willing to opt out. So we have been able to test several students this week, and we'll continue to partner with them and see that study through fruition. Understand this is just not Marysville research either. It's communicated as a pool of research from the 10 school districts involved in the study.
And kind of going back to that, even though we're doing the testing, that currently doesn't change our quarantine strategy, correct?
Correct. Students who are quarantined or identified as a close contact are still quarantined and brought to school for testing if their parents elect to have them involved in the study. So some districts decided to forego that. We feel that's something that's really working for us and did not want to take a risk like that. So hopefully it may lead to that being a strategy in the future when face masks are worn appropriately and distance is ensured.
Right.
That's a potential outcome of the study.
Mhm.
I wanted to give you
Diane?
Yes.
And I don't know if this is a little off the topic or not, but we've asked parents to take temperatures of kids and to keep kids home if they show any symptoms or whatever. Has that, from what we know, because I think, this Ohio State testing and so forth, I think at least touches on that a little bit. Have we seen that working?
I missed the end of your question, Mr. Smith.
I think he said, have we seen that working?
We have parents reporting absences as being symptomatic and not sending their students to school based on that checklist. So that is a part of it. I cannot tell you that we've actually studied how many of those have ended up into a positive case. I would tell you the biggest thing we're experiencing right now is exactly what Dr. Orsina said, especially with some of our youngest students, is household spread. Typically a parent tests positive, older sibling tests positive, so they test the entire family. And in fact, the younger student is positive as well. So did it start with the parent or did it start with the younger student? No one can really tell you that at this point. So we are seeing parents do the right thing in keeping kids home. We're doing the same thing with staff members. If you're symptomatic, stay home. And that seems to be working and people are doing that. Virtual Academy update. K6, we allowed transition back at the end of the first trimester. I just wanted to give you an update on that as well. So you can see that we've had some transitions taking back. Most of the gain, so transitions have taken place both directions, but most of the gains have been into the hybrid model. We'll again do transitions for the 9-12 at semester, but we've already taken that survey and anticipate these outcomes. Currently, we do have spots in Alt K6 that some families have requested to switch even in the last couple of weeks. In 7-12, that transition is really not possible until semester by the way the courses are established. So students will be able to transition to Virtual Academy if they would like in the grade 7 through 12 at semester time as well. I wanted to cover remote learning days. You probably saw a couple communications that have come out recently. One of the major points of emphasis with everyone has been, are we ready to shift from the classroom to home if we need to? And the answer to that is yes. Parents have received communication from building principals, and if need be, we've talked a lot about being able to turn on the dime in that case to a more restrictive environment like Learning Level 4, and we are prepared to do that. Students are able to access their learning through Zoom, Schoology, Unified Classroom. So those are the platforms in which students can access their learning pieces and connect with staff. We're able to personalize that instruction through systems like iReady and Alex. As well, students are able to show what they know through Google Drive, Go Formative, and different pieces like that. So we have kind of that tiered approach, hanging on to our emphasis on personalized learning and really that idea of anytime, anywhere instruction and learning. I think that, like everything in education, we come up with new words all the time when it applies to instruction, and really as blended learning has become more prevalent in schools, you'll hear the words asynchronous learning and synchronous learning. But basically, this slide demonstrates to you the 4 tenets of how we're approaching remote learning should we need to move to a remote learning platform. And you can also see that we're going to continue to emphasize that social emotional well-being of all of our students. So when it comes to weather-related remote learning, which is somewhat a different category, so kind of that idea of a traditional snow day, the first 3 days we will have teachers post assignments, and students will be able to access those assignments by 9 a.m. And students are asked to engage with that work. When we hit day 4 and beyond, then we will be taking advantage of synchronous and asynchronous activities where the students and teachers are engaging together in remote work. So as we move forward and think about where we are and where we're headed or potentially headed, I think it's important to say that we've continued to communicate. We want kids in person as much as possible, and we are going to continue to have that as a priority, as long as we can do so operationally and keeping everyone's safety in mind. We're going to continue to look at those factors that we've shown on our dashboard and how those influence our ability to operate school. We're going to also maintain those strong relationships and collaboration with local health officials and our support groups and medical advisory team to inform our decision-making. And really continue, we know that everything our students participate in our organization are important, but our priority has to be the academic and social emotional progress and growth of our students. And we will continue to communicate our progress, restrictions, hiccups, challenges to stakeholders on a continual basis. So one of the things we're going to do as a strategy to start to slow things down is effective on Monday. We will no longer be renting our facilities for a non-school related activities. So currently it could be Little League basketball. It could be soccer coming inside for a facility. Due to the youth spread and the amount of connectivity to youth sports in the community, that is one thing that we're going to postpone right now until mid-January to try to help slow that gathering down. We will be informing the groups. The one exception to this will be the Pumpkin Dash is scheduled to use our facility on Thanksgiving. And we did talk to Dr. Orsina about that today. We'll go ahead and push forward with that outdoor activity. But meanwhile, we'll postpone all other activities until mid-January. Our next steps that we're looking at in considering kind of a slowdown of activities to try to help offset the spread is really looking at reviewing extracurricular activities. Ohio High School has put out a study or what would I call it? A questionnaire. The OCC is holding a meeting. And certainly we have local decision-making as well when it comes to extracurriculars. What I would tell you, a few slides ago, I showed the number of current quarantines. That about 35% of those quarantines are a direct result of our own extracurricular activities. So we have had some quarantines of entire teams at this point. We're investigating another one currently. And those are directly impacting our ability to provide in-person instruction to all students. So we are going to look at those pretty closely over the next few or next week. We'll also review co-curricular activities. So what other activities are students coming together for? And typically I would say this is a 7-12, which is where we're really seeing our biggest, I guess, swing of cases and quarantines. So looking at those activities and really reviewing those with the advisors and directors and principals to ensure that we are doing everything we can to institute safety protocols and see if there's an opportunity maybe to restructure some pieces of that. And every day we'll continue just to monitor our ability to keep the buildings operational. Even since we've been communicating this evening, there are more tests and quarantines coming in. It seems to be an ever evolving situation. So that does take place on a daily basis. And do you have any questions, I guess? We can go back to that slide if someone has something on that slide, Marcus, in particular.
I had a couple quick questions, Diane. Okay. Number one, in regards to the OSU testing protocol, the parent or student has to opt out from testing. It's not, you have to get permission.
No, the student or parent has to bring the consent form to testing to consent to the testing.
Okay. I just want to be clear about that.
Yes.
And regarding students having to do so much remote work, I think a lot of times it's very difficult for students to stay motivated to do remote work. So I know that all the buildings are looking at additional tools to help make that remote work a little bit more engaging for students.
I would 100% agree. And one of the things that we are looking at specifically and people have been working on are some pieces on the social emotional side in particular to really look at habits of mind. Some of the things we did last spring that really built a sense of community. I don't know if you remember or not, but we had some spirit days and some things like that that really connected, or you could, I think there was a baking thing one day. What were you having for dinner? Some things that tried to build some connectivity, even though we were far apart. And so they've been working on designing some pieces that would fall back to that alignment to try to foster a little more excitement and interest.
I noticed Mrs. Wells did a nice baking thing the other day.
I just saw that on Twitter today. I was catching up and did see that. So,
and in the building notes, I know we had talked a little bit about. Preview was just kind of jumped out at me at some of the programs that they've been kind of investigating or working on to just for what you were saying, Nan, just to kind of help make some improvements in that remote learning platform.
Yeah, I think some general reminders. Mark alluded to that building will turn yellow on the platform, and we are sending a communication when you hit that 80% mark. But it sometimes wouldn't take much to really tip it over even for the next day. When you talk about just, I know flu it hasn't really been a factor this year, or maybe not a factor yet, or so it's just, we really need to understand how fluid some of these situations are and really do change in a matter of hours, sometimes minutes, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And we, it's, again, we want everyone to be healthy. We wish everyone speedy recovery. I don't want to forget those pieces too. There are some people that are really struggling as well. And so we just want to keep all of that on our mind as well.
Well, and I know, we have heard from some people who, are nervous about staying in the hybrid model. I guess for myself, when I look at the dashboard and when I listen to Dr. Orsina and just kind of know all of the different protocols that we put in place, you do have to ask yourself, and kind of heard this when people were wanting to go back in person. They said our kids are safer when they're in school. And I feel like, based on many of the comments that Dr. Orsina made, that still remains true. And then that argument about everybody going back is we would have gotten rid of the ability to have the 6-foot distancing. And so that would have impacted this new model that you shared with us. So anyways, I think that while we have these strategies in place, while we have staff available, that it kind of goes back to that whole consistency, that idea of having consistency, having that regular schedule. I think that has been so incredibly valuable for us, out there talking to other people who are in districts where they've been having to bounce back and forth from hybrid to all in person to remote to hybrid. I mean, and like Dick Smith said, we've only been in school 12 weeks. And when you think about having 3 or 4 different instructional models within a 12-week period, that's not good for anybody.
Right.
In my opinion.
And currently, I believe the student quarantines were up to 215 students. And so the challenge really is continuing to be, as a teacher, balancing all those demands. I have students in quarantine that I'm connecting with, and my students who are coming in. So, I mean, it is, we keep saying we've never done this before, but really, meeting the needs of all those aspects is really a challenge. Our teachers are doing a great job, and I couldn't. Tomorrow, we're going to celebrate that again, but it's just such a challenging task to balance all that and stay operational. So,
yeah, I mean, I think it's important. And I know you talk to the principals all the time, that just making sure that we're listening to our staff too. And we know that they're exhausted, and everybody is probably really looking forward to Thanksgiving, So anyways, I know that you're doing that all the time and listening to them. And that's important.
right.
Does anyone have any other questions or comments about all of those updates? That was a lot.
And I just like to hit one thing as a reminder. There wouldn't necessarily have to be a board meeting to launch us into a remote situation. So if a building, for example, turned negative pretty quickly, and we had high absences and we were not able to fill, kind of like transportation, and it then it became a necessity to do that. I've had some parents call and say, well, what if it's 2 weeks to a board meeting? Well, we can always call emergency meetings, but also it doesn't necessarily require board action for that to take place. So I want to, provide that comfort as well, that we are always going to act in the best interest of students and staff that way.
Right. And I think we've discussed that as a board as well. It kind of goes back to the approving the instructional model, and then just some other policies that talk about just some of the issues that we might be facing during the pandemic, and making sure that you have the authority to call, switch to whatever it might call for.
Correct.
Whatever the situation might call for. Yes, Mr. Smith.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that our teaching staff, all the custodians, all the secretaries, all our principals and so forth, including our superintendent, other administrators, are just doing an incredible job. I mean, the presentation that Mark gave us today on the new dashboard that he created, just specifically for our district. It's just, to me, it's astounding. It's absolutely astounding. I had somebody, in fact, had a couple of people this past week said, I have no idea how you've been able to operate your schools at the level that you've been able to operate them for this length of time. They did not believe it was possible. And so I know that I think it's the Army Corps of Engineers says the difficult they do immediately, the impossible takes a little longer. And so I think we're doing well.
I'm glad you brought that up, Dick, because I was, as I was thinking about the meeting tonight, and just thinking the different phone conversations we've had and having a chance to look at this new model, we just kind of get used to the fact that these things happen in our district, but it's a good reminder to thank the incredible leadership that Diane provides for our district. And, she's tireless. She models our vision every day. And then it's really nice to see it. It just continues to trickle down. And so the work that Mark did, like you said, our entire staff is just going above and beyond every single day. They've learned so many new things. And you just see it on the different Facebook posts and tweets, all of that kind of stuff. Just the creative, innovative ways that they're connecting with their students and keeping their chins up and marching forward. So really, really appreciate you, Diane, and the entire staff.
Well, I appreciate that, but it's certainly, this is a team. We've said from the get-go that we're all going to do things we've never done before. And I think we all have examples of that. And we will continue to be here and support our kids and families. That's something we all share. It might not be as smooth as we want sometimes, but it's certainly, I couldn't be more proud of the work that is coming out of the buildings right now for our kids and families. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to share?
I think that's plenty. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Moving on to Todd, our treasury report.
Okay, I was just going to talk briefly about the 5-year forecast. We have the November 5-year forecast on the agenda for approval tonight. There's no changes compared to what was presented back in October, but I did want to highlight a couple items that will be potentially impacting the forecast going forward. One of those items is we're anticipating receiving $795,000 from the Bureau of Workers' Compensation, what they're calling a dividend. In November, we actually received a little over $200,000 in a rebate, which we've kind of become accustomed to receiving, which we've received each of the last 3 years, I believe. That number is already in the 5-year forecast. So this new number is, I think it's kind of being described by some as kind of a stimulus that the governor's kind of directed because there's some extra funds available with the Bureau of Workers' Compensation. So with that, we're talking a little over $1 million that we'll be receiving from the BWC this year. So it's a nice boost and, a very large chunk of revenue when you talk about our day-to-day activities. When you talk about the big picture of the 5-year forecast and this being one-time revenue, it really doesn't move the needle. It really has no impact on levy timing. $795,000 is just, around 1% of the annual budget of about $57 million for the general fund. So like I said, very significant, but at the same time, when you're talking, levy picture, doesn't really move the needle there. Second item I wanted to talk about as it pertains to the forecast, there's been a lot of renewed and really activity around the Cup-Patterson funding formula, or also known as the Fair School Funding proposal. A couple things with that. As it pertains to the 5-year forecast, I think where we're at right now is probably a fair but conservative picture of if the Fair Funding School Act were to pass. I say that because even if it were to pass, they're talking about this being phased in over a 6-year period. So at a minimum, they're saying most likely there would be some sort of a guarantee in place to where in year one, the guarantee would be you would be placed back at where you would be on the formula. And I'll talk a little more about that, but in essence, that's what's in the forecast right now. So when you look at fiscal year 22, we've already assumed that we would go back to the number we were at back in fiscal year 19, which is a nice increase due to the money we lost. It's a little increase of over $1 million due to the money we lost from the economic downturn and the COVID. So just a little bit about that formula. They broke it down as far as 3 main components in coming up with that formula. The first being establishing a base cost. What does it cost to educate a student? I'll back up a little bit. In the previous 2 years, our current year as well as last year, we're really not on a funding formula whatsoever. In essence, we're on a guarantee. Fiscal year 19 was the last year we were actually funded based on a formula. And even then, we weren't even really formula funded because then we were capped. So it's really not been a great system for quite some time. Fiscal year 20 and fiscal year 21 that we're currently in, we were supposed to be guaranteed based on where we were at in fiscal year 19. But again, due to COVID, each of those years, we were cut by a little over $1 million. So all of that to say, the most recent funding formula that we were under, that base cost per student was around $6,020. The new Fair School Funding formula, that number would go up to approximately $7,200 per pupil. The second component that they're looking at would be state versus local share, which is, again, somewhat similar to the more recent formula that we had, but there's going to still be a different formula, a different way of looking at it. They're going to take into account property values within the district. That would make up 60% of that state versus local share. And then the other 40% would be based on income of district residents. So they'll take that into consideration in determining the share of state funding that you should get versus looking at how much you might be able to provide locally through real estate taxes or local income tax or those kinds of things. And the third component are what they're calling the add-on categories. Again, those are things similar to what we currently have in the system: economic disadvantaged aid, preschool funding, special ed funding, gifted funding, English language learners funding. If this funding formula were to be fully implemented in year one, the simulation right now shows Marysville schools state funding increasing by close to $2 million. So, that's great news, very encouraging. But like I said, best case scenario, they're talking about phasing this in over a 6-year period. So again, if you look at the 5-year forecast, and let's just assume from a, like I said, what would I consider a best case scenario? Let's say funding is going up by $350,000, $400,000 per year as this gets phased in. if you remember, the biggest problem with the forecast we're looking at right now is revenue is actually decreasing, mainly due to that tangible personal property reimbursement being decreased each year by $500,000. So even if this funding formula comes into play, it's probably not even still enough to offset the decrease that we're seeing in the tangible personal property reimbursement, which again points to why the levy is going to be necessary and why this funding formula probably won't impact levy timing. It could certainly impact a millage ask and hope to maybe reduce that, but I don't see any way that this is going to impact the timing of the levy. From my standpoint, what I see as some of the biggest positives of this funding formula, especially for Marysville schools. One, some of that component funding, for instance, the transportation funding. If you look at a previous formula, that $6,020 base cost per student, the transportation piece of that is actually included in that $6,020. Whereas with this formula, transportation is outside. So you're getting your base cost per pupil, and then on top of that, you would get transportation funding. So that is a good thing for the district, for all districts. The other thing that I really like is components that would also be taken out of our formula. So right now, charter school funding, open enrollment out, those students, that's deducted from our foundation formula. One that doesn't impact us yet, but could in the future, is also vouchers. Right now we have 0 for that, but again, that's something that could impact us in the future. And that would also be pulled out of the formula for the district. The big benefit of that when it comes to community school funding as well as open enrollment. So right now, on a per pupil basis, we're getting a little less than $4,000 per pupil. But when a charter school student or an open enrollment student, goes to wherever they're going to go, the deduction to our state funding is the per pupil amount of $6,020. So we're losing an additional $2,000 to each of those students, to those schools. And you can look at that in multiple ways. Either you're robbing another student of their state funding, or you're taking real estate tax dollars and sending that away. So the benefit of this being taken out of the formula is you're no longer going to be losing that additional funding, because it's going to be totally separate from the formula. So I really like that part of the formula. So like I said, overall, there's been a lot of positivity around it. I've been reading some of the questions that the legislators have been asking. I think you're seeing a little bit of the usual, where, why is this district getting a bigger increase than that district? So, I mean, that's kind of the norm. But I think one thing that's a little different with this formula is you're seeing bipartisan support, which, speaks to, maybe it's a little more likely to happen. They're really pushing for approval of it to happen soon. So, I'll keep you updated as we know more. That's all I've got. If there's any questions.
Any questions? Thanks. That was good. Great news about BWC.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
I was afraid you were going to tell me I was on mute that whole time.
Oh, yeah. Do you mind going through that again? Okay. Board President's report. As you know, for the student achievement portion, the last couple months, I've been sharing information about the 6 areas of focus for boards. So previously we talked about vision and accountability, and so now the 3rd area is policy. Just basically the fact that adherence to policies is really critical in a school district, and policies should be fair, consistent, and in the best interest of all in our community. Also the fact that our decision making should be based on these policies and on data and evidence. And it's kind of interesting because for the Capitol Conference, I attended a couple of sessions on Tuesday, and both of them brought up these 6 areas that boards should that successful boards focus on. And they are planning a winter series that's going to cover each of the 6 areas in more depth. So they're going to have 6 2-hour sessions, and they plan to host those sessions on their on-demand library, hopefully in February or March. I also sent the November success issue, and they always have some nice examples of creative ways to improve student achievement. And one that stood out to me was that somebody had made an obstacle course to help teach finances. So I think like the kids were given a certain amount of money, and then they had to go through this obstacle course, and through a variety of things, they would either end up, maybe making money or losing money. But I thought that was kind of a creative way. And so anyways, I would share that with you all. We had a Chamber of Commerce meeting this morning, and also had a groundbreaking yesterday afternoon out at Marysville's Innovation Park. There's going to be an 84,000 square foot spec building that's focused on R&D and mobility types of things. Really, I think a win-win for our school district. There's also going to be a Spanish automotive company that's going to be building in there. And so, they talked about the fact that they had made this investment about 5 years ago, and just the amount of time that it takes to kind of get things rolling. But I think things are starting to happen, and it's exciting because Marysville Schools was up there as a partner. We had approved the incentives for the development area, and hopefully we're going to benefit from maybe some internship opportunities, or just some connections with some more businesses in our community, and obviously taxes at some point too. Also attended our ag department had their virtual advisory committee meeting earlier this week, and I've been on that advisory committee for several years. So it was really nice because I got to see some pictures of some renovations that they've made to their classroom space. So if any of you have been back in that FFA department, they had several smaller sized classrooms, and they had knocked down a wall based on some advice from the advisory committee last spring. They'd knocked down a wall, and never expecting that they were going to need a big space to socially distance and all that kind of stuff. So it was perfect timing for them. But it looks real nice. I also had the opportunity to meet Mr. McLean, our new teacher, who replaced Mr. Keck. And I think he's bringing a lot of talents to our program. He loves teaching in the shop, and he just commented how impressed he was with all the equipment that we have available for our students. And I know you won't be surprised to hear that Mr. Keck is still helping out. So we miss him, but I'm glad to hear that he's still helping. And then reminders, ED 411, that's an economic development free virtual event this year on December 4th. I think several of us are already registered for that. It's a great opportunity to just hear about the benefits of economic development and the importance of the partnerships with our schools. Also want to make everyone aware of some community events coming up. So we've got our community Thanksgiving dinner on November 26th. It's going to be carry out only this year. The Hope Center, every year they have a Hope for the Holidays program, and generally it's a pretty good sized fundraiser for them, where people come in and they have dinner and they have some entertainment and auctions. And so obviously they can't have it this year in that format. So they are going to have a radiothon on December 5th from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And you could follow that radiothon on either 96.7 FM or 1270 AM. And then finally, the Care Train auction is going to be on December 11th, and that's going to be a virtual auction starting at 6 p.m. So I just encourage our board and anyone else who's watching to please consider volunteering or supporting all of these worthy causes in any way possible, because they all do great work to support our community and many of our students and their families. And then I know we had the Capitol Conference this last week, and again, that was a first. It was an entirely virtual conference. I know we like to try and share things that we've learned from that, and I don't want to go into a lot of depth, and I would encourage the rest of us, if you've got something that you think is really worthwhile sharing, go ahead and maybe share it in an email with people. But one thing that kind of stood out to me is, as I was attending some of these, is the fact that people were saying with these live stream meetings, we're having a lot more of our community members are actually watching board meetings. You know, in the past, we generally would have parents come in if their students were going to be recognized. But other than that, really not too much participation in our board meetings. And so it's kind of nice to know that people are actually watching what's going on, but it also gives us an opportunity to maybe explain what the role of a board member is, because people aren't always aware of some of the constraints that we are under, or just what our role is. And so I thought kind of two main things is the fact that as elected officials, we can only meet and discuss school board business as a group or a majority when we are in a scheduled meeting that has been publicly noticed and is open to the public. So anytime, if we're out in the grocery store, you know, we can talk to people, but we're not really acting as a board or as a board member. And then number two, just the fact that the board is really not directly involved in the daily operations of the district. So our role is to develop the policies that guide our district. We hire our superintendent and treasurer. We evaluate them against their annual goals and objectives, and we vote on hiring and operational recommendations from our superintendent and treasurer based on policies, community values and expectations, data and evidence. So, you know, for the most part, when people have concerns in the district about their student or just some other things, it's really going to be much more effective for them to reach out to a teacher first, a building principal, or you know, maybe call administrative staff at the board office for help. Of course, we always encourage people to reach out to us with questions and concerns, but just know that a lot of times we're just going to be forwarding them to whoever is directly responsible or directly involved in those kind of issues. So, you know, just kind of a nice opportunity to provide a little education for our constituents, I guess. And then the other thing I wanted to remind everybody is that because Capitol Conference was virtual, they are making all of the breakout sessions and keynote speakers available through the end of the year. So you have your login information, you can go in at any time and listen to those. And I think that's really, you know, that's maybe one of the positives of this pandemic, because other times you go there and you're limited to how many you can attend in a certain day. But now if you want to, you can attend every single one. And then finally, let's see, December 10th. That is our next regularly scheduled meeting. And Mr. Smith, unless you know otherwise, I know at this point right now, the ability for us to hold virtual meetings expires on December 1st. So we'll just kind of have to keep an eye on that. The other thing is our organizational meeting is currently scheduled for January 4th, and I would like to consider changing that to January 11th. By law, we need to have that organizational meeting by January 15th. So just thought I would throw that out there, and we can confirm that. You know, we don't need to confirm that right now. We have to have our organizational meeting date set by December 31st. So I'm just throwing that out there as a heads up for you guys. And that's it for me. Kind of a long report, sorry. Mr. Smith, legislative report.
Okay, I'm trying to trying to do the technology. I think a couple of things. First off, it's important to recognize we're at the end of a legislative session. And so from now till the end of the year, any legislation that is not passed would have to be reintroduced and have to start all over again after the first of the year. So there's a lot of pressure on the legislators to try to wrap some things up and to make sure that they get some of the legislation passed. From my contacts and conversations, it looks like the meetings are going to be extended virtually through, I think it's June of next year anyway.
July
And
1st.
so I think that option for us. And some of the other latitude given the board dealing with expiring licenses for teachers and administrators, and some of the other testing things, it looks like those will probably all be addressed. There are some concerns. OSBA's identified a couple of things they would like to see added in legislation. I don't know whether those will take place or not. In the report that I sent to you as an email,
You muted yourself, Dick. Dick, you're muted.
excuse me. I was trying to pull up a document, and when I do that, then I lose control of the audio. So I'm still learning. But asked to serve on a couple of boards or a couple of committees looking at College Credit Plus. Contacted Brent Johnson, who's our coordinator, and all the guidance counselors at the high schools to ask for input on the College Credit Plus program. The first committee I served on met. There was a pretty narrow set of changes to the program focused on allowing students to take additional courses at their own expense. And that seemed to be acceptable to most everybody. So I think those changes will be incorporated. Coming up next week, I've got a meeting on eligibility, and many of the comments from our guidance counselors and from our coordinator focused really on the eligibility and some of the other operational issues with College Credit Plus. So we'll be talking about that, and there will be, it looks like there will be a series of meetings that'll take place to look at that. I just got the link for the meeting today. I've been in communication with Tracy Richardson and Dave Burke, encouraging them to support things that are beneficial to our school district. Todd talked about Cup Patterson, and on that, the one thing that I would say is going back probably 3 years ago, I attended some meetings where they began to lay out some of the first steps that were taking place. And they've spent probably 2 years just trying to figure out how much it costs to educate the typical child in Ohio. And their mantra during that period of time was, do not look at the dollars, look at the concept, look at what the factors are. And then at the end, once they've figured out all the different pieces and parts and decided, you know, what they were going to do with transportation and all the special services and so forth, then they applied dollars to it. As Todd mentioned, the legislators oftentimes focus on the dollars. And so my message to the legislators was, look at the concept. Look at what they were trying to do. This piece of legislation that's being proposed is not perfect, but it does, for the first time in the history of funding in the state of Ohio, attempt to lay out something that makes sense in terms of why dollars are being spent in the schools. And so I've been encouraging them to look at this and support it. I saw, I don't know whether it was Twitter or Facebook, Tracy Richardson made a comment about hearing some presentations at a committee meeting and hoping that we would be able to get this piece of legislation passed. So I know it's got a lot of push in the House. The question is probably going to center on what the Senate wants to do with it. So that's my report today.
Thank you, Dick, and thank you for agreeing to serve on those committees as well. Appreciate your being willing to represent our district and just public education. So thank you very much. Amy, do you have
and College Credit Plus? I know I know College Credit Plus is a huge part of what our students are involved in the high school. And so I think it's really important for us to have a voice at the table. And so if anybody has comments they want to make, I'd love to hear them.
Thank you. Okay, next up, Amy, do you have a safety report?
I do. The Union County Drug Free Coalition has announced that they have what they call UC Talks. It was developed to empower and encourage Union County youth and parents to have an open dialogue about mental health, drug and alcohol abuse, and how to stay strong when faced with tough situations. So the website is uc-talks.com. Also, they've been talking a lot about the prescription drug abuse. So a lot of times when we're talking to our kids, you know, we think about the dangers of drug, we tend to focus on street drugs. Those drugs are extremely dangerous. However, the high risk involved with the misuse of prescription drugs or the abuse of those is the fastest growing drug problem in the United States. And profoundly, right now, it is impacting a lot of our teenagers. So we need to really know, and parents can make a huge difference with 3 steps: know, secure, and dispose of prescription drugs that are not being used by yourself or that were prescribed to the teens. We encourage parents to talk and then talk some more with their children. Experts say children whose parents talk early and often about the dangers of drugs are up to 50% less likely to use drugs in the first place. And unfortunately, right now, we are only seeing 22% of teens that are reporting having specific conversations on the topic of prescription drug abuse with their parents. So we're encouraging parents just to take a simple but monumental step towards preventing these important, by having these conversations to prevent that drug use. The 3 most abused and misused prescription drugs right now are falling under opioids, which are pain relievers, depressants to ease anxiety and insomnia, and stimulants to promote attention and alertness. So if parents would continue to talk about these and continue to discard any prescription, because the kids automatically think, well, it's prescribed by a doctor, it's okay. They have no idea that overuse of these, because they see their parents taking them, grandparents taking them, and they think that it's okay, it's not going to hurt them. Also, there's a digital, a view time for a digital called Screenagers. And it's growing up in the digital age. This is going to be on tomorrow, and it is provided by Union County Drug Free Coalition. The link is https://www.screenagersevent.com/screenagers. That is brought by Union County, again, Drug Free Coalition, and it's all about the digital age right now that these teenagers are going through. And just would like to also remember to let the parents know there is free tutoring for all students at the Hope Center. Hours are Monday through Friday from 4 to 6 p.m. and Saturday from 10 to 2. If you'd like to register your child for any of these, the phone number to call is 937-303-4209 and ask for Donna or Becky. And that is it.
Amy, did you say that Screenagers program, did you give a time for that?
I think you can go on anytime because it says view on your time now through November 21st.
Okay. And then my only other question was with discarding drugs. I know they have certain dates where they, will take old drugs. Is it just certain times of year, or is there a place in our community where people can go at any time?
Yes, they do it certain times through the year, but the sheriff's department, the courthouse, actually. So if you go to the courthouse, right there in the lobby of the courthouse is a drug take-back bin, and they can deposit any of the prescription drugs in there at any time.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Yep.
All right, we are to the business section of our meeting now. So at this point, I would accept a motion to approve our draft minutes from our October 15th regular meeting and our October 20th special meeting.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Powers.
Second.
Second by Ms. Savage. Any comments, questions, revisions to the minutes? If not, roll call, please.
Ms. Powers,
Yes.
Ms. Savage,
Yes.
Mr. Luke,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Ms. Devine.
Yes, motion carries. Next up, we have a Board of Education item. I would accept a motion to approve a resolution supporting the Fair School Funding Plan.
So moved.
Second.
Did you motion that, Dick? Okay, yes, and second by Ms. Savage. Any comments, questions? I know we've spoken about this. This is the funding plan that Todd talked about and that Dick's talked about. A lot of bipartisan work has gone into it, and it sure would be nice to have something other than a biennial budget where every 2 years we're wondering what the heck our funding is going to look like. So any other questions or comments?
This is a very good move for the state of Ohio, even though the current legislation I would never say is perfect. It is a great step that moves us significantly in the right direction.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Ms. Savage,
Yes.
Mr. Luke,
Yes.
Ms. Powers,
Yes.
Ms. Devine.
Yes, motion carries. Next, I would accept a motion to approve the treasure items.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Powers,
Second.
second by Ms. Savage. Comments, questions? Todd, did you want to say anything?
Not much. I already discussed the 5-year forecast, so that's on there. On the appropriations, there's a couple large appropriation increases. One being the literacy grant. The literacy grant for fiscal 21 was split into 2 different allocations. So the $210,000 is our second and final allocation for this fiscal year. And then there's the $139,000 in Title I. Just pointing out that's not actually our funding, doesn't go to our school. We're basically the fiscal agent for the Ohio Youth Correctional Facility for their Title I funding. So it kind of passes through us. So that increase doesn't really impact us necessarily.
I saw a couple of stadium donation from the Monarch Quarterback Club. I think that's probably part of their pledge or something.
Yes.
Yep. And just another donation from Eagles Benevolence Charity Fund in honor of Frank Butler for our Special Olympics program. So that's always nice. Any questions or comments? Okay, you did a great job explaining the 5-year forecast, Todd. So
thank you.
I think we're ready for a roll call.
Ms. Powers,
Yes.
Ms. Savage,
Yes.
Mr. Luke,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Ms. Devine.
Yes, motion carries. Next, I would accept a motion to approve Steve Devine as a classified substitute special education aide.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Powers,
Second.
second by Mr. Smith. Any comments or questions? Roll call.
Ms. Powers,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Luke,
Yes.
Ms. Savage,
Yes.
Ms. Devine.
Abstain, and motion carries. And next, I would accept the motion to approve our superintendent items.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Savage,
Second.
second by Ms. Powers. Any comments, Diane?
Sorry about that. I would like to comment on Kelly Kralick's retirement. Talented teacher at Naven, and has touched so many lives and students and families. So we wish her all the best, and sorry to see her go, but just our best wishes to her. I would like to highlight the initial calendar for the 21-22 school year. As you know, we put it on 1 month, and then would be up for approval next month. And last, I would like to highlight the out-of-state show choir performance on the agenda. We did decide to go ahead and submit those with pending safety regulations. We don't know, obviously, what situation we'll be in at that time, but they are on for approval with, I guess, additional comments and the recognition that safeguards and et cetera will have to be considered as we get to that time. But neither one of those trips are overnight.
And I know there's also the Section 504 Handbook update. It just looks like it's a really a nice logical move. It looks like it's going to make some reporting requirements a lot easier.
Yes.
So, and yeah, I second what you said about Kelly Kralick. We're gonna miss her, but we definitely wish her well. Does anybody have any other?
Kelly, I've known since her high school days, and it's always touches you a little bit when somebody that was your student is now retiring. But Kelly, a wonderful person, has been an amazing asset to our community and our school district. I sincerely hope that she will stay active and busy in our community, maybe in the school district in some capacity. She's just a great person. Can't say enough about her.
Okay, how about a roll call?
Ms. Savage,
Yes.
Ms. Powers,
Yes.
Mr. Luke,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes,
Ms. Devine.
Yes, motion carries. And now we are to comments and questions from board members. Dick, you're up there right now, so we'll start with you.
well, thank you. In the board notes, there was something that I think I'd like to highlight a little bit. In Raymond, they've been working on their level 4 remote schedule and preparing to be able to implement that. But they also been working to identify students that have been receiving additional help that may at this point not need that additional assistance. And in Bunsold, they've been involved in trying to identify students that might need some more in-person help and support. And so I think both of those buildings are demonstrating how, as we are in the hybrid system, looking for ways to improve the delivery of what we're doing, making sure that the kids are not falling through the crack and getting all of the support that they need. And at the same time, looking to reallocate the staff resources and move that from people that, from the students that may now be catching on and getting it, and being able to allocate those resources to other students that may need some additional help. I think that was wonderful. I want to thank Mark for the work he did on the dashboard. I think that's going to make a real difference for our district. And I also want to give a shout out to our technology department. They have put together the ability for us to be able to have this meeting tonight and be able to distribute it to anybody in our community that is interested in watching. And I know that they have been addressing the individual situations. We talk about personalized learning. Well, they're providing personalized tech services to people, students and adults that are struggling a little bit. And so shout out, they're doing an amazing job and really making the educational process at Marysville shine.
Thank you. Mrs. Powers.
Well, I'll ditto everything that Dick said. And I just, again, want to say thank you to our entire staff, from our administration all the way to our classified. Just thank you. I know that you're working hard, and it's not easy for anyone out there right now. And just want to say thanks for taking such good care of our kids. That's it.
Okay. Mrs. Savage.
Okay, I want to do a shout out. Thank you to our PTOs, our parents, staff, teachers, and I'm going to second the IT guys because I think they've been working hard too. I wanted to highlight a few items that I came across in the notes. The virtual parent-teacher conferences and the parent Zooms for feedback on either in-person learning or the digital learning. I appreciate that two-way conversation between parents and teachers directly. I think that can really help resolve some of the issues. Thank you for the wonderful PTO pumpkin patch at Raymond. That was a wonderful idea. Thank you to Mrs. Wells at Northwood for the book walks. And she copied that activity and did it for all 5 elementary buildings. And I think that was an awesome thing to do. Thanks to all the schools for the social emotional learning emphasis for all the kids that are feeling a bit lonely and isolated at home. I think it's wonderful that we're doing that. The implementation of the Lunch Buddy activity, whether it's remotely or in person, I think the kids paired up with those lunch buddies really, really appreciate that activity. And the BMS creation of the A+ and B+ schedules, I think that's an awesome activity to get the students that are struggling into school 1 more day a week. So I want to recognize all of those activities. One more thing, and don't typically do this, but I recently watched The Social Dilemma. It's a documentary on Netflix, and I would highly recommend it for all parents to watch it with their teenagers. I think it has a very, very relevant point about the use of social media in this digital age that maybe should be shared as a family. And that's all. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Luke.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to comment on the dashboard. I find it a really promising tool. It looks like it's going to be very user-friendly, and one of the things I really like about it is it has it shows you all the different factors that need to be balanced, and how the decision of which model to go to is inherently complicated by that. So we're getting input from some community members that want the kids back in 5 days a week, and we're getting input that want the kids out all the time. And we know from what Dr. Orsina said that we're not transmitting the virus in the buildings. So that's really good news. And it might make us think, well, we can just put the kids back there 5 days a week, but then we would lose the distancing that's part of that safety protocol. And we also know that the numbers are going up in our community quite dramatically, but that doesn't mean that the kids should all be at home all the time, because we're doing a good job of keeping them from spreading it at schools. As the numbers go up in the community, no matter how good we're doing in the schools, we can be impacted by that, because our staff are likely to have more cases or more quarantines, and eventually we may not be able to operate some parts of our facilities. And I think all of that is captured in the dashboard. So I encourage our community members to use these resources and to, as we were talking about last month, to really pitch in together and do everything we can. The more we work as a community to bring the transmission down, the better we're going to be able to function as a school. So thank you to everybody who's been working on that, and thanks to the teachers and the administrators and the parents for keeping our kids educated through this.
Thank you. Todd, do you have any comments?
No, nothing to add.
And Diane, would you like to add anything?
I think I've said plenty tonight.
Okay, well, so have I, but I'm still going to add a little bit. No, I know I was glad Nan and Dick both commented on several things that I'd seen in the building notes too. Always like reading them. It's just amazing, just the creative things and the kind things that our buildings do, the great partnerships we have. And I know one thing that I also saw that some students are, and they've done this in the past, but they're sending letters to local servicemen and servicewomen that our local military family support group will make sure get out to them at the holidays. Also just want to shout out that it's a National Public Education Week. So proud to be serving the best district in Ohio. And then just kind of a reminder to all of us as we, that throughout the pandemic, our focus has been and is going to continue to be on student achievement, social emotional support in a safe environment. And it's nice, our assessment data has really been pretty positive on a macro level. But then again, as people were pointing out in those building notes, we don't really look at that macro level. I mean, it's nice to report, but we're getting down to the nuts and bolts and looking at every single student and making the adjustments that need to be made to support them. So, our job as a board is to support all of our staff, to thank them, thank our community, thank all of the partners that we've got out there. I think the pandemic has just really shown what a critical role our school plays in our community. And again, I'm so proud of our staff. And really proud of our parents. I know, I feel like for the most part, the comments and the emails that we've received have been, as time goes on, I think they've been very positive, very supportive, very understanding, and just, we really appreciate hearing people's comments. We do hear them all, and we do take them into consideration. And so, keep them coming. We like to hear from you, and, talk to your teachers. Let's keep these lines of communication open. And I know when we all can get back, we're probably going to throw a really big party. So Todd, I think you need to be setting aside some money for a celebration party, okay? With that, I just would like to wish everyone a blessed and healthy Thanksgiving. And we're going to be going into executive session. And from that point on, we won't be having any motions for any action, anything like that. So the live stream will end when we go into executive session, and that will be the end of the meeting. So we'll just do our own adjournment, and you'll be able to see that in the minutes later. So with that, I would accept a motion to go into executive session for both ORC 121-22G number 1 and number 2. So to consider the employment of a public employee, and also to consider the purchase or sale of property for public purposes that premature disclosure of information would give an unfair competitive advantage.
So moved.
Motion by Mrs. Powers.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Savage. Roll call.
Ms. Powers,
Yes.
Ms. Savage,
Yes.
Mr. Luke,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Ms. Devine.
Yes. Motion carries, and we are in executive session at 7:22. Thank you.